of the sound that had made her suddenly cold with fear. She reached for a log to put on the dying fire. The fire threw up sparks and crackled as it accepted the wood, but before Nora could enjoy the benefit, there was a sudden loud hammering at the door behind her. Normally it would have made her jump. Now she walked slowly to the door and opened it, not daring to think what she might find on the other side. The figure was tall but stooping, wrapped in a dark cloak. The firelight flickered across his wrinkled features. Nora crossed herself, realizing that death himself had come back for her Albert. But then the old man smiled thinly. "May we come in?" And his voice was quiet and kind. The "we" worried her, but his companion was a young woman, about 18 years old. She was wearing a long, shapeless coat, though her face was lively and pretty. The fire danced in her eyes, and her blonde hair shone as they stepped into the room. The man was talking again, his voice cracked with age. "Horace Oldfield. The rector asked me to stop by if I had a moment. You know he is away this week." Nora nodded quickly, though she had not known. In the better light she could see his clerical collar, and noted how frail and bent the old man was. The girl was holding his arm to help him stay upright. "I used to be the vicar of St. Bartholomew's, not far from here, until I was forced to retire." He seemed to realize that the girl was holding him and struggled without success to tug his arm free. "My daughter, Elizabeth," he explained, as if to excuse her. Nora found her voice at last. "I'm sorry. Please, sit down." She was surprised how calm she sounded. "Can I get you a cup of tea? The kettle's on. My husband has just—" She stopped, pulled up abruptly as she realized what she had been about to say. How natural it would have sounded. How ordinary to say that Albert had taken the dog out. "We know," Oldfield said sympathetically, sitting down where Albert Wilkes had sat for his tea year after year. "He passed away last week, I understand. Very tragic." He shook his head sadly. "You have our sympathy, doesn't she, Elizabeth?" The girl said nothing, holding her father's hand across the small table as she sat opposite him. But her emerald eyes were full of pity and feeling as she looked at Nora. And then, only then, did Nora collapse to the floor, sobbing and crying for her dead Albert. Desperate for him to come home again, no matter how he stank of the earth and reeked of decay. It was early evening, and the light was fading. The sun was giving up its last attempts to break through the smog that shrouded London, and everything was washed in a grubby haze. Eddie Hopkins leaned against a wall, feeling the cold roughness of the crumbling brickwork through his shirt. He watched the people on Clearview Street, assessing them with a young but professional eye. It was not a good area for him to be looking for work, too quiet by half. He worked better and safer in the rush and bustle of more crowded streets. He preferred his clients to be ostentatious and wear their wealth on their sleeve, or rather in easily accessible pockets. A dilapidated carriage went by, the horses looking old and tired. A group of children ran past, laughing and joking. One of them stuck his tongue out at Eddie. Eddie ignored him. Just a kid. Eddie himself was nearly 15, or almost nearly. Then he saw the old man with the dog. He watched the figure shuffling awkwardly along the pavement, head down, jacket caked in dirt, hands twisted into claws, and every movement an effort. An easy target, Eddie thought, as the man went slowly on his ponderous way. The dog wouldn't be a problem. But as he passed, Eddie caught a whiff of him. The air was heavy with coal smoke and smuts from Augustus Lorimore's nearby foundries. It had an acid tinge to it, but even so, Eddie could almost taste the smell that was coming off the old man, a cloying, slightly sweet smell that spoke of decay and neglect, a graveyard stench. As he walked, the old man kept his head down. It swayed gently from side to side with each heavy step. What Eddie could see of his face was lined and saggy. The face was angled so that Eddie could not see the man's eyes, just the shadowy outlines of the sockets, like the blank eyes of a skull. The dog was straining at its lead as if trying to escape. It struggled and pulled and yelped, but the old man refused to quicken his pace. Eddie turned away. As he turned, he saw that he was not the only person interested in the old man. Though they were on the other side of the street, 2 men were following him. They were walking too slowly to be as casual and at ease as they tried to appear, and their eyes were fixed on the old man. Even through the gathering gloom, Eddie could tell that they meant the man no good. Of course, Eddie would have been happy to relieve the old man of his money, but the methods the 2 men opposite might employ would be far less gentle than Eddie's quick dip and away. Their hands were already clenched into meaty fists. Their eyes were dark and narrowed, and focused with violent intent. As they began to cross the road, Eddie could see that the larger of the 2 men had a pale scar running down the length of one side of his face. It started above his eye and disappeared under his chin. None of what Eddie saw boded well for the fragile old man, and although it was none of his business, Eddie was annoyed. The man with the scar was speaking quietly to the other as they crossed the road. They both ignored Eddie as they walked past him, but he caught a few words, spoken by the scar-faced man to his sidekick in a surprisingly cultured voice. "Went the wrong way. It isn't working, and we need to—" Eddie stepped back into the shadows to let the 2 of them pass by, then followed. He pulled his cap down low over his eyes, hiding his face. He straightened up and made a show of staggering drunkenly along the pavement, weaving back and forth. Catching up with them, he stumbled into the smaller of the men from behind, knocking him sideways. Sidekick pushed Eddie roughly away as he hurried past, but Eddie caught his sleeve, anything to slow him down. "Sorry, Gov," he said, his accent thick and his words slurred. "Didn't see you dawdling there, and that's the truth, sir." All right, Sidekick pulled away. Eddie made to grab his sleeve again and continue with his apology. Scarface's index finger jabbed into Eddie's chest before he could move. "Enough," the man said, his scarred face suddenly close to Eddie's. Then it was gone, and the 2 men were hurrying away after their prey. Eddie crossed the street and ran after them on the other side of the road. He could have overtaken them easily, but he kept a short distance behind, watching. The indistinct shape of the man and his dog appeared out of the evening. But Scarface and Sidekick made no attempt to catch him up. They turned into a wider road, with houses on one side, set back from the street, behind iron gates and long driveways. The other side of the road was a high, solid, unbroken wall. Behind the wall, Eddie thought, would be a small area of parkland. Countryside surviving in the heart of London as part of some private estate belonging to someone rich. Some way ahead, he thought he could see a set of enormous gates, a pale gravel driveway snaking beyond. But the mist was closing in, and it was difficult to be sure. Eddie returned his attention to Scarface and Sidekick. They were almost level with the gates as they followed close behind the old man and his dog. When they made their move, it was sudden and swift. Eddie darted across the road, but he knew he would be too late. The dog was gone, lost in the foggy night with a volley of barks and yaps as it fled down the road, its lead trailing behind. As before, the old man seemed totally oblivious. His stooped shadow merged with the silhouettes of the men as they took his arms, turned him sideways, dragged him away. He seemed to put up no fight at all, not even a plaintive cry for help. Running as fast as he could, Eddie saw why they had chosen this moment. They were outside the high, imposing wrought-iron gates. In the middle of each, what looked to Eddie like a lizard's head was fashioned out of the ironwork. The design echoed the creatures that stood guard on the stone gateposts, a large statue of a lizard rearing up on each side of the entrance. Eddie could imagine a long forked tongue ready to lick out at anyone who tried to enter without permission. One of the gates was open, and the men dragged the old fellow through it, kicking it shut behind them. The gate squealed on its hinge, then clanged into its fellow. The stone lizards ignored the intruders. Eddie was angry with himself. He should have realized what was happening. He should have helped earlier. He could have shouted